Welcome to week 5, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everybody was able to successfully get SA1 finished and turned in. We'll jump into SA2 basically right away. I will get SA1 graded and feedback posted as absolutely quickly as I can. Tends to take a little while because there's upwards of 100 essays that I need to grade between now and the next couple of weeks. So I'll just ask for a little bit of patience, but if anybody has any specific questions or worries, please feel free to reach out. So we're at week 5. It's a good time to sort of pause and check in. By now, I will say that everything should be kind of taken care of as far as a lot of the hoops and the bureaucracy that some people have to deal with. And we should all more or less be in the swing of things by now. But I do acknowledge that the beginning of the semester, there tends to be a lot of complications and a lot of things that quite likely are out of your control. Getting financial aid so that you can get your textbook and making sure that you're registered and haven't gotten expunged. There's just all kinds of things that I know about and that many of you have reached out to me about. And I tend to do this at the beginning of every semester anyway. But once the first essay is in, what I tend to do, and you'll notice this has already happened, is I open up the first 3 or so weeks of the semester's work, discussion posts and quizzes, and we'll give anybody a chance who may have missed work for whatever reason to get caught up so that we begin the second quarter of the semester on a positive note. I'll just remind everybody that particularly when it comes to discussion posts, there are 2 replies. You get full credit for your original post and for responding to 2 other people. And yeah, that's every time. And there's been somehow some confusion over that requirement, even though I did mention that in previous videos. And when you click on the discussion forum, those requirements are the first thing that you see when you click on that page. So for whatever reason, if you have missed it, now's your chance to go back and get caught up and make those replies or get your post done, whatever the case may be. Reminder for quizzes, you get 2 shots. If you take the quiz once and don't do as well as you feel like you could or should, feel free to take it again. And after you take it the first time, it should tell you which questions specifically you got wrong. So those often involve settings, and so sometimes if a setting is incorrect, things won't work. So if any of that is ever untrue, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be sure to take care of that. So I will also say that this is the one time that I will offer that. I will more or less expect everybody to kind of be on the ball this semester. Get your discussion posts and your replies done, take those quizzes, get your work submitted, and you won't have a problem. So as far as SA2 goes, so we're switching gears from pure just reader, summary, and response to a little bit more of a critical rhetorical analysis. Many of you are probably familiar with, analyzing rhetoric. Many of you are probably familiar with ethos, pathos, logos. I tend to shy away from trying to instruct students on rhetoric using the words ethos, pathos, logos, because I find that students frequently don't know how to use those words, which they're ancient Greek words. It's no wonder. Ethos, pathos, logos are very broad terms that cover a lot of different ideas, and a lot of those ideas bleed together. A thing that a speaker might do rhetorically could be categorized as ethos, pathos, or logos, sometimes all 3. And so it's less helpful to talk about how an author uses ethos or uses logos or how they have pathos than it is to get specific about what an author is doing. The example that I tend to use is one that by now most everybody should be very familiar with. David Foster Wallace's This Is Water. We've focused entirely upon how or what David Foster Wallace says and how we relate and connect and what the relationship, what kind of conversation we can have as a writer to an author who we've read. But if we were to turn our attention more to not what he says, but sort of how he says it, how he crafts his speech, how he crafts his argument, if you will, then there's a number of specific things that many of you have addressed in discussion posts and likely will address in your essays, that have, where you're responding not necessarily to specific things that he says, but how he's coming across to you in that moment. David Foster Wallace's speech is one that has a bit of a glimmer of hope, but a bit of a very dark view. David Foster Wallace is kind of sure that everybody walks around most days kind of miserable, and hating life and hating the tedium that can come with just daily living and existence when you're a full-time employee taking care of themselves. So if we were to talk about David Foster Wallace's rhetoric, we might say that in terms of like logos, he's not citing sources, he's not quoting history, he's not necessarily relying on expert opinion to back up anything that he's saying. He is 100% talking about his personal experience. He is using his own lived experience as evidence for the things that he says, as support for the points that he's making. Another thing that he's doing, just for the sake of logos, which of course is reasoning and making sense, is he is telling stories. He is trying to give hypothetical examples as parables, as didactic little stories for the sake of illustrating what he is saying to his audience when he doesn't have personal experience to go with it. Even though a lot of what he says is filtered through a bit of a hypothetical experience, we could still say that a lot of that is coming from him. But he's not necessarily reaching for hard evidence. He's not citing a lot of numbers, which, for the sake of what he's trying to do and the circumstances and of where he's speaking and who he's speaking to, it might be perfectly appropriate for him to rely mostly on personal experience and anecdotes and stories and parables like he does. And if we were to sort of ask ourselves, well, what kind of stories does he tell? Well, he tells stories about people getting stuck in traffic, and he tells stories about people getting frustrated and people being sort of slowly driven mad at times by, the soul killing muzak of the grocery store and the angry or religious bumper stickers on the cars that cut him off. And so these are the examples that he uses. In terms of pathos, that kind of gives a lot of what he says a very dark tone. He is coming across with an idea that the best thing that you can get out of an education is to keep yourself from being miserable a lot. And whether he is, talking personally or just talking broadly about people, he's still sort of addressing a dark topic. And he himself sort of says so. He acknowledges many times that this isn't breezy and grand and inspirational. This is just sort of how I see the world and reality as I view it. On the other hand, his tone at times is funny, dare I say. Like some of his sad, dark examples are so exaggerated to the point of being comical. And if you listened to his speech along with read it while we were doing this discussion or while we were doing this assignment, then you might have picked up on that. You might have heard the audience laugh at times. So he's trying to couch his dark philosophy in at least a little bit of humor and a little bit of folksiness. But for the most part, we might say that because of his logos, because of the stories that he tells and the examples that he gives and the personal experiences that he relates, it creates this kind of morose tone. And then in terms of ethos, how does that inform how he presents himself? He is constantly telling his audience in the speech that he is not the wise old fish. He's not trying to preach at you. He's not, speaking about virtue, and he's not trying to say that this is something that you should do that he can do very easily. He tries, at the very least, to be very relatable, very, like I said, folksy, very down to earth. Whether or not he pulls that off, we can, disagree on. That's part of what critical analysis entails, is judging not just the result, but the attempt. What was he trying to do? And if there needs to be a discussion of what kind of disconnect between the attempt and the result. Maybe he was trying, and maybe you can see him try, but it just didn't come off that way to you. Him trying so much to be down to earth might come off to some as condescending. And at the very least, he certainly presents himself as somebody who struggles with, finding meaning in a lot of his daily interaction. He is speaking of himself and his own experience as someone who has a lot of struggles. He mentions that he overanalyzes things, that he gets stuck in his head. He brings up suicide. And whether or not you know about the fact that he did later in his own life or not, you have to admit that you don't bring up suicide when you're trying to make people feel good most of the time. And so all of these things kind of play off of each other. And so ethos, pathos, and logos it's kind of pointless to use those words in particular when it's much more effective to just point to the things that he does, that a speaker does. And so as you read the notes on rhetoric and as you engage in the discussion, just bear all this in mind, that as we're moving toward our second essay, there is, if you want to really kind of level up with this assignment, avoid using ethos, pathos, and logos as the criteria that you're evaluating a source by. Focus more on the specific moves that an author makes. And I will say that to go along with this, week 3 has a little bit of a heavy workload ahead of you, which more or less boils down to the fact that I'm asking you to read 3 different articles, which also involves 3 different discussion quizzes, of course. These 3 different articles written by Peter Singer, Jared Diamond, and Terry Martin Hecker, very different authors, very different subjects. And so for the discussion post, what I'm asking is not really a discussion even of what they say, unless you are trying to point to specific things to explain how they come across. The goal is kind of the shag, marry, kill game, where in this instance, you're going to read these 3 articles and kind of make some reads of who the author is, and based on what they say, and then ask yourself, if you were at a party with all 3 of these people, who would you want to sit down and engage with the most? Who would you want to kind of be polite to and you might talk to, but wouldn't be totally interested in, hanging out with? And then who might you want to avoid the most, based entirely on how they come across in their articles. Now, you can point to moments of the articles to support where you get that feeling from. But this isn't about comparing their subject matter or really responding personally. This is more about trying to read a little bit about who the author is through their writing. So that's the work ahead of us. The assignment is for the essay is going to be a little bit more complex, because not only am I going to ask you to engage in rhetorical comparison, rhetorical analysis. I'm going to actually ask you to make a comparison between 2 articles and their rhetorical styles. So we'll talk more about comparative writing next week. For now, let's just think about critical analysis. The notes that are linked and the assignments are linked in the announcement below. Don't forget that you have a chance to catch up on that late work, so don't miss out on that. If you have any questions, reach out. And I will remind at the end of the video that if you reach out to me through Brightspace, I lose those messages all the time. And I apologize if you sent me a message through Brightspace email that I haven't gotten back to. Very, very much prefer that you just send me an email at jmmurphy@pstcc.edu. And I will get back to you as quickly as I can when I hear from you. Enjoy your week, and let me know if I can help.